It is an absolute honor to be joined by Mark Nepo, a beloved poet, teacher, and #1 New York Times best-selling author of the Book of Awakening, which has sold over 1 million copies around the world. Mark was named one of Oprah's own Supersoul 100 leaders using their gifts and voices to elevate humanity. Jamie Lee Curtis said, "There is one book that transformed my life, and that book is the Book of Awakening." Mark has published over 25 books and produced 16 audio works. Mark explores the deep waters of the human experience, weaving together spirituality, poetry, and personal transformation in ways that awaken the soul. Let's dive in. Thank you so much, Mark, for being here with us today.
Oh, you're welcome. It's great to be with you. Absolutely.
And so, my first thing I want to dive into so that people get some context around your work and what you do. I heard an interview that you did some time ago. You said that almost dying dropped me from living from my head to living with my heart. Can you take our listeners on a journey of what happened?
Oh, sure. Well, thank you. And and let me also put it in context of what we're all going through now worldwide, because when I was first diagnosed, which is I'm 69, and this was in my 30s,
Yes.
and when I almost died from a rare form of lymphoma, so blessed to be here at all. And I'm surprised that, and I shouldn't be, that a lot of what I went through, I feel emotionally we're all going through now. And the first thing is that when I was diagnosed, I went into a doctor's office one day, of course, thinking like, this can't be happening to me. What's happening here? And they must have somebody else's file. and, and then when I went to leave that office, the door that I had come in through was gone.
Wow.
There were the life, the quote, normal life that I had stepped off of to get that diagnosis was no longer, there's no way back. I was in the new world. Even when we find new and deeper ways to be, there is a legitimate and natural process of grief and loss and 1,000 emotions. So to go back to, my journey, I was in my mid 30s, and all of a sudden there was this appearance. It was a tumor on my head.
Wow.
And I was thrust into this journey. And what happened it was a 3-year period, was the heat of that journey. But the first part, that tumor, which grew like a grapefruit on my skull right over here, it vanished in a miracle. And I was thrown back into life, like Jonah spit out of the mouth of the whale. And because that was so dramatic, there was a sister tumor on a rib in my back. And within 10 months, that started to grow, and I was right back in the hospital. And that was my darkest time, because I felt like, did I do something wrong? Did I waste the miracle? Did I not embrace this second chance? And then I discovered that traditional medicine, I had that rib removed from my back. I had to go through severe chemotherapy until the chemo started to kill me, and I had to stop and say no to that. And so since then, I never say healed, I always say healing. Even though it's 30 years, we are all still healing. And what I learned, because I had to say yes at one point of the journey, no at another, wait, don't, yes. And so what I learned was that miracle is a process and not an event.
Wow.
And the real reward for the miracle, we think of miracles as extraordinary things that happen that we can't explain. Well, certainly the deeper reward for the miracle is that it gives us a miraculous way of seeing that the miracle is everywhere in the ordinary. It's always there. What's holy is always there if we can stop long enough and open our heart and we go, oh, there it is. Oh my God, it never went away. My pain or my fear or my busyness or my scheming or my dreaming got in the way. And great love and great suffering has always been true. Bring us back to the miracle of life. And so from that time, through no wisdom on my part, I didn't suddenly decide, oh, I think it's better to live in my heart than my head. No,
Yeah.
I was turned inside out and upside down. And
Mm,
when I landed and blessed to still be here, everything had dropped.
yeah.
And so from that point forward, my mind has always served my heart and not the other way around. And the one other thing to, and then we'll pause here, but the one other thing that was so important during that time for me is that I was blessed to have people from every tradition. And I mean, even atheists and scientists and
Yeah.
all kinds of people kind enough to offer me help and blessing. And so when I woke up still here, I have become a student of all paths because I was not and am not wise enough still to know what worked and what didn't. And I was challenged to believe in everything, and all my books and my work and my teaching centers on the common, I believe, center of all paths, the unique gifts of each, and how we need each other to be fully alive.
Beautiful. This is, there's so many things that I can take away from what you just said in terms of the miracle being a process. We're always looking for that miracle as a destination, but it really is the process. And then you seeing that oneness of everything, that it wasn't choosing what would work, it's embracing everything. I think that is powerful.
And it always, it's humbling, but this is where I've learned it. Like, let's bring that to a very, in what we're going through now, a very practical process that,
Yeah.
we're trained to be very good problem solvers. Problem
Yes.
solving is a great skill of the mind. That's wonderful, but it's not a God to pray to.
Mm,
It's not a worldview.
yeah.
And so often there's only so far that the mind can go, no matter how bright, no matter how thoughtful, no matter how much wisdom we carry. And whenever I've reached the limit of my mind, I've learned because of that embrace of everything that the next thing I do is I
Mm,
give from my heart to anything, anyone, whatever's before me, because giving cleans the eyes, cleans the ears, cleans the heart, and now other things are possible that the mind couldn't uncover.
beautiful. This is really beautiful. Wow. Mark, as you were speaking, you had this moment, you went through a door, and when you walked out, it was a totally different world. You received a life altering diagnosis. And I think for many people, yes, the situation has sort of created a similar circumstance, but for many people, they have not experienced that life altering moment. They're in a place where things are ticking along. They're having some success, but the only thing that they know is that they have this voice that's calling them to somewhere else, but there's no external force pushing them. How
Yeah.
do you embrace this call of the heart when the head is telling you that it's good how it is, like everything is good how it is?
Well, I think that, for me, so let's back up a second. So everyone who ever lives
Yeah.
will be given the chance to be dropped into the depth of life.
Hmm.
And that can happen by, it doesn't have to be a life threatening thing. It can be a beautiful thing. It can be being loved completely for the first time. It can be wonder, beauty, surprise. For me, it happened to be cancer. Now, cancer, there's nothing significant about cancer, but because what is opened in us is always more important than what opens us.
Hmm.
And so I think that what everyone who's living, we we need to always be open to
Yeah.
what is calling us. Um, because and great love and great suffering will do this. So we can't plan it, we can't seek it out. We can just stay open because there will be 1,000 angels in different forms every day
Yeah.
calling us to a deeper life. And you don't have to worry if you walk past one because there'll be another one right
Mm.
there. And so now the
Mm.
word Sabbath, Wayne Muller, an American writer and teacher, years ago he had a book on the Sabbath, and in there the touchstone was that the definition of the word Sabbath in the Jewish tradition means the one day we don't turn one thing into another.
Hmm. Amazing. The one day we don't turn one thing into another.
Yes. So there's nothing wrong with being creative or repairing things or problem solving, but under it all,
Yeah.
the miracle of life is complete as it is, and we don't need to mess with it. It's
Mm.
beautiful as it is. As human beings, ants carry dirt and build an anthill, and birds build nests, and human beings, we build things. That's what we do.
Yes.
But we don't build things. I think we forget. We don't build things
Yeah.
to replace the beauty of what is. We build things to participate in life.
Yes.
Life is complete and beautiful as it is. So we've been forced into a global Sabbath to
Mm.
where this virus has been a catalyst to say, stop manipulating, stop bending things, stop breaking
Mm.
things, stop thinking. And this goes to a deeper perennial truth. Stop thinking that life is other than where you are.
Mm. Beautiful.
One of
Beautiful.
the one of the menacing assumptions, and it's not just in the modern world, it's happened to every generation,
Yeah.
is the assumption that life is other than where you are. It's
Mm.
over there. If I could just
Yeah.
get over it's if it's in that relationship, if I could be like them, or it's
Mm.
in that play, if I could just be like my dream, if I could just reach that, then I'll be happy. And one of the things that almost dying did for me was I certainly look forward to things, but when I dream, it always comes back to now.
Mm.
It always comes back to now because there is no there, there's only here.
Yeah, but that can be very challenging to do. And I know it's something that I try to consciously work on, but I know how a lot of times the brain, it wants to take you into the future or it wants to keep you somewhere in the past. And it's all of that sort of dance between the past and the present, I mean the past and the future, that most times we can't even be present.
Well, and I think that this is human. So it's not like we uh, we need to eliminate going into those places. We need to have it balance in us. So, I look forward to things. I was looking forward to our talk today.
Yeah.
Um, but I get to today by stepping in the moment and in the next moment and in the next moment. And so let's use this to talk a little bit about fear,
Yeah.
because fear, which is a normal human response, the proper place of fear, the proper purpose of fear is to alert us to danger.
Yeah.
Then we grab onto that and we exaggerate it, we inflate it,
Mm.
and then we get stuck in it. And fear gets its power. And I know this because in my life, especially when I was going through my cancer journey, I've had a lot of fear. When
Mm.
when I was first diagnosed in my 30s, I hadn't been through anything that serious, and I was afraid of everything. I was
Mm.
terrified. Fear gets its power, I learned, from the future and the past.
Mm. Beautiful. Let's just say that one more time because this is really deep.
Fear gets its power from the future and the past. That is, if something, if I'm in pain or something's difficult,
Yeah.
I say to myself, my fear says to me, wait a minute. What if it stays like this? What if
Mm.
the future, what if it's always going to, that is what terror is. Terror is when we imagine and are controlled by the prospect that whatever we're going through is going to last forever. It'll never change.
Yeah.
And so the future grips it. The power of from the past is something terrible has happened. Like I had cancer all those years ago. I had to go yesterday to get a little spot frozen from a dermatologist off my top of my head.
Yeah.
Well, that was okay. That wasn't a big deal. But as I was driving there, all of that experience from the past, even though it's over 30 years ago,
Mm.
all of it starts to show up. So by the time I get there, I go, oh,
Yeah.
what if this turns out to be like that?
Yeah.
And then the fear. So the only thing we can do with fear
Yes.
and pain is to right size it. And that means returning. Doesn't mean never. And so on the positive side, sure, we plan and we remember wonderful things. On the
Yeah.
fear side, we dread things from the past and the future. But the practice for all of us, and I can't tell anyone how to do it, we have to personalize that,
Sure.
is to return to the moment and right size it. So
Mm.
let me share a story. And this is an ancient anonymous teaching story from India. So there's a master and apprentice,
Yeah.
and there's always a master and apprentice. And and the apprentice is very annoying because he's always complaining. Oh, he's complaining about everything, about life, everything. And the master finally says to him, I want you to get a handful of salt, put it in a glass of water, and return to me quietly.
Yeah.
The apprentice does this. He comes back. The master says, drink from the glass. So he drinks and he spits it out. Master says, what's the matter? He says, it's bitter. Master says, I want you to get the same exact amount of salt, put it in your hands, and follow me quietly. So he does this and he follows the master who leads him to a lake. And he says
Mm.
to the apprentice, put the salt in the lake, which he does. He says, now drink from the lake. So the apprentice kneels on one knee, he scoops up the water, he drinks it, it dribbles down his chin. The master says, well, and the apprentice says, oh, it's fresh. And the master looks at the apprentice, he says, stop being a glass, become a lake.
Love it. Love it. So he was in too much of a small container, looking at it from too much of a
Yes,
amazing.
stop being a glass, become a lake. So this is an ancient teaching, anonymous, which says whether the salt is our fear, our pain,
Yeah.
everyone in life will get their handful of salt. No one is exempt.
Mm.
Some of us get it all at once, some of us get it a grain at a time, but no one, everyone will get their handful of salt. And when the only way when facing fear and pain to right size it, not
Mm.
eliminate it, we can't eliminate it, is to enlarge our sense of things. Stop
Um,
being a glass, become a lake. Now, you can hear that, or someone's listening with us and saying, well, then I won't be a glass again. Well, no, you will. And I will
yes.
because we're human.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. Fear and pain, when they say hello, they make us
Shrink. Yeah.
and get small. And
Yeah.
it's the heart and spirit's job to say, oh, wait a minute,
Yeah.
and to enlarge my sense of things, because in addition to our pain and fear, if we stay small, we will also grow bitter.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyone who's listening, if this touches you or makes sense, it is your job to say very specifically, and
Yeah.
I would invite you today or this week, what is one personal way you can enlarge your sense of things the next time you're afraid or in pain? What does that mean
Mm.
to you? Does that mean you call up and talk to your dearest friend? Does it mean you listen to your favorite piece of music? Does it mean you go for a walk by the ocean or in the woods? What for you is a very personal way that you can enlarge your sense of things.
I love it. I'm just reflecting on everything you've said around fear, and it really puts it into perspective because fear shrinks us. And then the second thing that I think is going to stay with me for a very long time is the fact that fear latches itself to the past and the future. And this is a huge awakening for me in this moment because it makes sense. All of the teachers all over through ancient times have talked about being present, and it's for this reason.
Yes. So and it doesn't mean that in this moment I won't feel fear, but the difference is we want fear to live in us and not for us to live in fear.
Mm.
Because if it's a part, it's a part. So even yesterday when I went to the doctor for this thing, as I'm driving, the fear from my past was getting bigger.
Yeah.
And then as I try to right size, as I try to enlarge my sense of thing, then when it gets right sized, no, now it's one of the 1,000 moods that make up my spirit. I have
Mm.
to attend it, but I'm not controlled. Fear is something to be moved through, not obeyed.
Mm. Love it.
When I ask my fear what I should do, my fear says be more afraid.
Yes. Yes.
I don't need to ask my fear. I need to ask my spirit and my heart what I should do.
Mm.
I need to face my fear, but not obey it.
Yeah. So you're saying don't try to avoid it. Don't try to, but really just know that you don't have to live in obedience of it. You don't
Yes.
have
So
to.
when we let, when the master tells the apprentice to be in a lake,
Yeah.
enlarge your sense of things. This is why all the different traditions have meditation practices, because when we breathe, we
Yeah.
enlarge. We
Mm.
enlarge. That's why when you are afraid, and even when you're in pain, if you take a deep breath, it doesn't
Yeah.
go away, but the edge comes off it
Yes.
because you're expanding and making room for other things. You're
Yeah.
making room for other things.
Amazing. Thinking
And
of, go
yeah,
ahead.
go ahead. No, I was just going to add this one thought
Mhm.
today is this is important that we all have a practice right now because
Yes.
worldwide, fear is the other virus right now.
Yeah. So having a spiritual practice, having some kind of thing to keep you grounded is important.
Very important. And, I've had people that I know, of course, and I've heard people say, my God, this is such a terrible time. I don't have time for an inner life,
Yeah.
stuff. Well, I would say this is exactly when we need an inner life. And here, let me offer, just to build on what you just said, Hannah, that and a
Sure.
tree, a huge tree is a great teacher. So let's take a redwood tree. And,
Yeah.
this 400 years old, And since we told a story from India, uh, a large tree of that stature in India is the Nahagraja tree. And
Yeah.
so these enormous trees, well, they can come down in hurricanes or tornadoes, but 99% of the time, they don't come down in storms
Yeah.
because they have deep roots and a wide trunk.
Hmm.
And when I talk about we need to tend an inner life, doesn't mean we
Hmm.
have to have things figured out, but
Yeah.
we need to tend an inner life, especially now, so that we deepen our roots and
Yeah.
widen our trunk
Yeah.
so that we can endure this storm,
Hmm.
so that we
And
won't be blown over.
I, but I want to expand on this idea of deepening your roots and right sizing things. And in your interview with Oprah on Supersoul Sundays, you shared this concept of you always wanted to be a poet. You had this idea that you were going to be this great poet until you realized that being a poet was keeping you in a small container when there was a larger identity
Yeah.
available for you. Now, I want to, because we have a lot of professionals listening, and we tend to put ourselves in this box of we're this thing and we're going to do this.
how do you understand when your identity, that career that you've carved out, whether you say you're a doctor, to realize that being a doctor is too much of a small container, or
Well,
being...
yeah, thank you. So let me say that the important thing here is following our heart. And
Yeah,
the word trust, the word literally means follow your heart.
yeah,
So one of the things is that our road in life, I know for me, is that it's wonderful to have dreams and ambitions and goals. We need them, but they aren't gods themselves, those
yeah.
goals and ambitions. They're kindling for the fire of our aliveness.
Mm,
They're how we become most alive. And
yeah.
so you can be, I mean, since I've discovered I've been a writer, a seeker, um, a teacher my entire life, but it's all evolved. So I think one of the things that I've come to understand is that often we have to be open, because often our dreams and goals and the things we work for, what we want,
Yeah.
they lead us to what we can't foresee. They lead us to other things if we're only open. And it's not about either changing course directly or staying true. It could be either. I will give you an example of each,
Sure.
but it's about staying true to what is heartening and what brings you alive, what brings you alive. So yes, I was, I wanted to be a poet. It's how it brought me to, it was the thing that connected me, how I see, to all
Yes.
of life and what matters. And then when I almost died from cancer, and then, I woke up on the other side and I was pretty disoriented in terms
Yeah.
of, um, before that, I was a driven artist.
Mm,
And then when I woke up on the other side, I had lost my drive. And I
mm.
thought, did I lose my gift? Like, what happened? I was very confused. And over months, I started to realize, oh, I'm no longer driven. I'm drawn to things.
No longer driven, but drawn to things. I absolutely love that. And I think everyone needs to bookmark that. Not driven, but drawn to things. This is powerful.
So what happened was I realized that, and the image for this is, imagine like the Mississippi River, like a strong,
Yeah.
big river. It makes a lot of noise when it flows toward the sea, and it
Yeah.
carves its banks and it's rushing along. And then when it hits the mouth of where the ocean is, that current doesn't disappear. It goes deeper as it joins the other water, and it
Mm.
becomes quieter, but more at one. And that's what had happened to me. As I was driven, I recognized my drive and my identity because I could stop and hear, oh, there's the river of my
Yes.
creativity. Yeah, okay, I'm okay. And then because this had carved me deeper into life, almost dying and still being here, I didn't realize at first that current didn't disappear, it just went deeper, and I couldn't hear it because now I wasn't driven, I was drawn to things. And that was
Wow.
freeing. That was more joyful. And that's one of the reasons that I've been blessed to be so prolific, because I can follow anything that has meaning and it can be my teacher.
Yeah.
So when we, so here's a story about this. And so how do people, I don't think we have to run out looking for it, but I think that
Yeah.
one of the lessons here is, for all of us, is that I've learned that working for what I want has often been an apprenticeship for
Mhm.
working with what I've been given.
Mm.
And my gifts have shown themselves when working with what I've been given.
Amazing.
And I can work hard for a dream, and I should, but
Yes.
often our dreams, even if I give myself completely, often our dreams don't always come true. But
Yeah.
in working for them wholeheartedly,
Yeah.
sometimes we come true, and that's more important.
I love that. It's not about the dream coming true. It's about you coming true.
Yes.
This is
So
beautiful.
so here's a story about someone working for what he wants, leading to what he's given. This is the story
Yes.
of a monk in Japan in the 1700s. His name was Tetsugen. Now, Tetsugen, at a young age, like 19, 20, his call in life, the talks of Buddha had not yet been translated into Japanese. And he said, I think I'm supposed to do this. So he was excited. He started translating and learning how to do that. He had an artist friend. And he said, look, you do beautiful woodblock prints to illustrate it, and we'll beg alms to have money to publish Buddha's talks, and we'll do this. And so they worked for years. And about 9 or 10 years into this, there was a flood in the northwest part of Japan where he grew up.
Oh,
And so he took all the money and he gave it away to help the people where he lived. And he went back to translating, and his friend was doing the artwork, and they kept begging more alms over years to get enough money. And they kept working, and another 8, 9 years, and now there was a famine in another part of Japan, but his heart had been opened. He said, well, they're no different than the people I grew up with.
yeah.
And he gave the money away again. And after 25 years, Tetsugen finally published the first edition of
Wow.
Buddha's talks in Japanese. And today, Hannah, there is an original in a museum in Kyoto and
Wow.
under glass, and the plaque reads, in his lifetime, Tetsugen published 3 versions of the holy text.
Wow.
Only one is visible.
Wow. Wow.
So he was destined to live the teachings of Buddha. That's how he translated them.
Amazing.
And
Amazing.
we don't know what we will be called. So to get all the way back to your original notion here about when I was a poet as my identity,
Yeah.
and then I saw like it was too small to contain the spirit that I was growing into. Well, the image here is of a potted plant. Now, whether we know whether we've tended them ourselves or not, and we know people who have, if you take care of a potted plant,
Yes.
the reward is it grows and you have to repot it.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you don't, its roots get bound and it dies.
Yeah.
It doesn't have room to grow. So what I was being asked to do was to repot myself.
Mm.
The first pot that I grew in was the identity of being a poet. Then I had to repot myself to be the spirit that I am. And so now I don't even know what to call that pot. I'm awake, I'm a teacher,
Yes.
see the way I see as a poet, and I certainly will always do that. And so all of us, it's like a cocoon. The purpose of a cocoon is to birth the butterfly.
Mm-hmm.
When that happens, the cocoon isn't false, it's served its purpose.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, another quick example, Albert Schweitzer, the great humanitarian who became a doctor and created a hospital in Africa. Well, not many people realize this. He was a professor, a tenured professor of philosophy at the University of Vienna. And he was also a classical organist. So on weekends, he'd play classical organ to sold out crowds in Europe.
Amazing.
And there's only one thing. He had a vision around the age of 40 that he was supposed to open a hospital in Africa. There was only one problem. He wasn't a doctor.
Oh boy.
So he went to his friends and people he respected. He said, I think I'm supposed to do this. And most of them said, are you nuts? You're tenured, you got it made, you're playing organ on weekends, forget about it.
Yeah.
He listened to everybody, and he resigned and went to medical school and became Albert Schweitzer.
Wow. Incredible. It's never too late. And when you feel that calling, just go for it.
And it's also that you could stay, if his call was to stay as a philosopher, he could have
Yeah.
repotted himself more deeply in that. So it's not about staying
Yes.
or going, it's about becoming true
Yeah. And
by
it's like what you
following the
said.
heart.
It's not just about being driven, but being drawn. He was drawn to do this. He felt this calling. So, really being awake to what you're drawn to, irrespective of what that is, or whether you think you're qualified or not.
Yes, absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
love it. You know, you shared something here because you started talking about the cocoon and the butterfly. And in your new book, The Book of the Soul, 52 Paths to Living What Matters, you share that after we are physically born, we must be spiritually born a second time.
Yes.
Why is this rebirth necessary? Because I've heard the concept in in Christianity. I'd love to hear what the spiritual birth means to you and for us even in this time now.
Yeah, so I think and feel that and we're all here, yes. So that metaphor is, we're all here by the grace and love of our mothers who went through physical labor to bring us here physically.
Yes.
And yes, then we start a lifetime of experience in a second womb, which is the life on earth, so that the soul can be born here.
Mm.
And what does that mean for me? That means that when we, however, and nobody can do this all the time, but
Yeah.
when we, however briefly, are completely where we are,
Yeah.
holding nothing back, being completely present, loving, truthful, then we are in a moment of heaven on earth.
Yeah.
Then the part of spirit, the portion of universal spirit that I carry while I'm here in this body touches the all spirit. And
Yeah.
that moment of oneness is joy. That moment of oneness, which it doesn't last, but it's part of that root system we were talking about. It
Yes.
gives us enormous strength. It gives us strength. This is what resilience is when by being who I am, I touch into everybody because we
Mm.
are more together than alone. And I'll share a moment here that was so powerful for me that also helped teach me that my father, who is now gone 6 or 7 years, and during
Yeah.
his last year of life, and I was visiting him. I didn't live in the same part of America then,
Sure.
and I was in the hospital, and I found myself, as often happens, I was feeding him applesauce,
Mm.
and in that moment, you know, my whole life, everything, all of life was in that moment. My
Yeah.
heart was in my throat and I was tearing and it was bittersweet and it was beautiful and sad and everything. Everything was in putting that spoon in his mouth and not disrupting his breathing and not hitting his teeth.
Yeah.
And so by giving myself over to that moment completely, I was fully myself. And at the bottom of my personality, I tripped amazingly into the moment of every adult child who ever fed a dying parent.
Yes.
And
I've been
so I was I was my full strength and I was buoyed by the strength
there.
miraculously of everyone who had ever done that.
Yeah. I can relate to this because I've gone through it with both of my parents who
Oh,
passed away. And in that moment where you're just one with them and you're so caught in the compassion and just being present with them and making that moment in some way you're hoping that moment you're transferring so much love in that moment that there's so much light in it that I literally can remember being there with my parents in that way.
thank you for sharing that. And it's I'm sure you experienced any
Yeah.
moment that we can give ourselves over to truthfully and wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
We are filled. It's like plugging a lamp into an outlet. We
Yeah.
get all the life force from the river of life just floods us, and
Yes.
that's the reward. And like that life force fills us, and makes us stronger than we are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's that strength that you didn't know you had, but you have it in
Yeah.
that moment. Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's
I,
really powerful.
and I'm so grateful for that. It was more than one. And so when we are touched that way, which is one of the, about the spiritual birth,
Yes.
I know for me that yeah, those moments don't happen every day.
No.
But what they open in us, just like cancer opened me to a depth of life, moments of total loving like that open us in a whole nother way so that everything is different after that.
It's true. And for me, it first happened. My mom died when I was 16, my dad when I was 28. And in both
Wow.
moments, yeah, and in both moments, it opened something in me at every stage that even the work that I do and why I'm so passionate about helping people express themselves and their brand in the world, it comes from seeing my dad die and before he died, sharing, the things that he wished he had done.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh, that's beautiful. That's
yeah.
beautiful. Yeah, one of the things that is a mystery and that's a paradox of life is that no one can live your life for you. No one has ever been here who is you. And the other side of the paradox, no
Yeah.
one can make it alone.
Yeah, it is so true. It
No
is
one
so
can
true.
make it
We
alone.
need each other. We definitely need each other. And that brings me to my next, because your new book, The Book of the Soul, and for those of you listening, it's already on Amazon and you can order your copy right now. You talk about living wholeheartedly. And I think you allude to that, in those moments where we both had like sharing with our parents who needed us in that time. How do you live wholeheartedly? Because I think sometimes we can get caught up in the stream of life and suddenly we're out of that vortex of being
So yeah,
wholehearted.
so I think that let's try to bring that all the way down to a very specific thing. And again, when I share, what I share are examples, not instructions. So
Yeah.
if they're examples, and I'm sure you and anyone watching, listening, can can find their own way of doing this. So one thing that I do is when I try
Yeah.
to live or return to the pace of what is real. What do
Mm.
I mean by that? I mean that I very consciously try to have my mind, my heart, and my body move at the same pace.
Mm.
And we can't do that all the time but when I do, that's when things slow down enough, and all of a sudden I notice the bird on the tree and the
Yes.
light on the bird on the tree, and all of a sudden it's like an extra special moment. Well, it was always an extra special moment. I
But we
just
miss
but
it.
I just wasn't in sync to
Present.
see it, to feel it. And I have found that when I can move at the pace of what is real, it's like tumblers in a mystical lock. Everything opens. And
Mm.
then something happens and I'm startled or I'm afraid or I worry. And then in my mind, now I'm not moving. But
Yeah.
that's okay. But I always try to return to the pace of what is real. So, what does that look like for you? Anyone who's watching or listening, how
Yeah.
can you do that? What's a way that you can practice? Maybe it's like, I have a wonderful dog who's my little buddy. And so, petting her helps me
Yes.
return to that, helps me
Yes.
return to that. And the other thing that I try to do is whenever I get my mind is racing or I get snagged by worry, or because the miracle is everywhere, I try to return and give my full attention to whatever is before me. I don't
Mm.
care if it's a can of tuna fish or
Yeah.
or if it's a stick on the lawn. Everything is holy. I just try to stop and bring my full attention because that allows me to open. And getting back to what we talked about earlier, that little practice
Yeah.
starts enlarging my sense of things.
Yeah.
So we all have
That's
to find these
powerful.
very specific ways
Yeah.
because return to that over and over again.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing is that it really takes living from a space of intention and really being intentional about being present and being in the moment.
Yeah, and the reward, right? It is, because we all have to work at being fully alive, and
Yeah.
that's not a bad thing. I believe in effort. I believe in effort. I believe in grace and effort, but I never know when grace is going to show up. That's why
Yes.
that's why I believe in effort.
Yeah. So I want to ask you, because you answered my question. One of my questions was about capturing those micro moments to have inspiration. I think you really captured this in this last discussion that we had. But there's a lot in the book. So you guys, anyone listening, you should get it. The Book of the Soul. It's out on Amazon. You can find it in bookstores as well. So what's your favorite story from the Book of the Soul?
Oh, so yeah, one of my favorite stories from the Book of Soul. Let me think here. Well, I can't remember because of all the books I've written.
I know, 22.
This is one of my favorite stories. I don't know if it's in this book, but it's one of my
Sure.
favorite stories, and
Sure.
it also touches into my grandmother um, who has been gone 30 years. She died when I was going through the cancer journey, but she was an immigrant from Russia,
Yeah.
and always had a thick Russian Jewish accent. And toward the end of her life, I think this story is from the Book of Awakening now that I'm thinking. And toward the end of her life, she was in what would now be assisted living, but in the 80s they didn't have that. There was just a wing of a hospital where they said, it's probably how they figured out to have assisted living. They said, well, we don't know what to do with these older elders, and we'll put them here. And so I would go to visit her. And one time in this time of year, beautiful, beautiful day, I went to see her. I had driven 300 miles. I got there. When I went into her room, which she had been in for like 6 months,
Yes.
and she was 93 at the time. I went into her room and I saw her before she saw me. So I got a glimpse of her face from the side. And she looked really glum, and so I came in, I said, Grandma, and then she was happy to see me. And I said, how are you? You look a little glum. And she said, she was on the edge of the bed and she said, oh, it's a gray day. And it was a beautiful day, but I thought, well, my parents had warned me, she's 93, maybe she's not lucid. But then I looked around the room, she had one window. And that window had never been cleaned. So it was a gray day for her because it was filtering all the sunlight. So I said, Grandma, the window's dirty. It's actually a beautiful day. Come on, I'll take you out to the courtyard. I'll get the window clean. And before she got off the bed, as only someone almost 100, having crossed an ocean, a lifetime, she chuckled and she looked at me and she said, got a dirty eye, see a dirty world.
Wow. Got a dirty eye, see a dirty world.
And I will tell you that I call that immigrant wisdom. And that has saved me. I can't tell you how many times, because there will be gray days in our journey. How can there not be? We have all kinds of days.
Sure.
But before we invest all our energy in dealing with a dark time, let's clean the window first. Let's make sure we know what we're dealing with. Take the time. And this is why we need to work at staying alive. This is why we need an inner practice. Whatever it is, doesn't matter what it is, because we need tools by which to clean the eye, the heart, and the mind, and then see if it's a gray day or not.
Yeah. This is powerful. So I want to ask you, before we wrap up here today, you said something very profound on one of your interviews. We are continually asked to learn how to ask for what we need, only to practice accepting what we're given. And I feel like this statement is very applicable to the time that we're in now. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of fear. We touched on what all of these meant earlier. What do you think this moment now is teaching us? And I know you shared a little on that, but in terms of acceptance. from this perspective of acceptance, what should we be learning?
Well, I think we're being challenged very strongly um, to stop and truly discover what it means to be alive and our relationship to others. Everyone is connected. There is a kinship of all living things.
Yeah.
We forget that, and this helps us, remember that. And I think what we're being asked is to drop
Yeah.
what we want and accept what
What
we're
we
given.
have. Wow.
And we can be stubborn.
Yes.
We can insist, but the more we insist, the more things we break, including ourselves. And I think we're being asked to re-inhabit the kinship between all living things. One, Mother Teresa said that courage is doing small things with love.
Yes.
That sounds like a gigantic thing. All we have to do is
Yeah.
is love and give to whatever is before us.
Yeah.
All we have to do is wash our hands with love. All we have to do is put on that mask with love and remember that you're not just protecting yourself.
Yeah.
You're protected because if we look for a moment, if you look at one human body, okay, mine, yours, as long as I have one more healthy cell than diseased, I'm considered healthy. I want a lot more.
Yes.
As long as there's one, well, we're being asked to look at humanity right now as a global body, and every soul is a cell in that body. And so when you keep your soul healthy, you are doing your part to make sure that the global body is healthy.
Yes. Yes. So it's a return to love. It's a return to oneness. It's a return to really seeing ourselves as interconnected in this bigger picture. I guess it's almost like the salt story you shared earlier. Like we tend to see our lives in these little containers when we're all part of this great lake of life.
Yes, and I think even when sheltered in place, I invite everyone to keep growing in place.
Yes.
To keep growing in place. And I think one of the ways, we can do that is to start to just simply like a practice of breathe and meditate, reflect on where you are.
Yeah.
And with each breath, open your heart to what's happening in this moment outside of your home, down the street, across the street, in the next town, in the next state, on the other side of the world. Breathe your way into connecting with all living things.
Yeah. So it's that interconnectedness. It's seeing that acceptance of where we are and not fighting the moment, but embracing the gifts that it has.
Well, and again, to bring it back to a felt level, it's not abstract. It's about when I am like what you and I experienced when our parents were dying.
Yes.
That's a lesson for everyday life, because when I open my heart, I feel the flow of other life come in and go out. The heart is an inlet, between you and me, between everyone. And what opens that is the courage to open the heart.
Beautiful. The courage to open the heart, because many times it does take a lot of courage to open the heart in the face of fear and that self-preservation mode.
Well, everything, and fear and pain and circumstance and weather and those things will close the heart. It's not about, but then it's our job to open. After we're closed, always open. I do want to thank you all for tuning in. It's been great to meet you this way and also to be a part of Hannah's good work. So I hope that you are safe and well and that you can find a way to keep growing in place.
This has been an incredible conversation with Mark Nepo's New York Times bestselling author. I got so many key takeaways from this conversation. Some of the powerful things that stood out for me Mark shared that stood out for me were: our dreams don't always come true, but we come true. Goals are kindling for the fire of our aliveness. He also shared that if you've got dirty eyes, you see a dirty world, and that came from his grandmother. I also particularly love this quote because it's something that I think we all struggle with. I believe in effort and I believe in grace, but I never know when grace will show up. That's why I believe in effort. And I think that was such a powerful share from Mark. There are so many other powerful pearls of wisdom in this conversation. And I invite you to also follow Mark and his work. He has released new books since the time of this interview, which was during the pandemic. And I invite you to check out his work online and his books on Amazon. For more updates and resources, I invite you to sign up for my free weekly newsletter at www.culturedlife.org. This has been Hannah Fitz, and as always, live the cultured life.